Okay, I was glad that a lot of people yesterday were able to get real output, because it makes a difference between the first time that all you get is error messages, and the next time, and all of a sudden you get something that looks great. All of a sudden, you either lose big or you win big. It seems when you're starting with these things, and also but the main thing is, that's the whole subject of our discussion today, is going to be about error messages and why the computer says such stupid things back to you. Now, when you're dealing with somebody else, it always helps to have a little empathy with them, of course, but also to understand their point of view. And especially a computer, sometimes it all makes sense if you can only understand the computer's peculiar point of view. And so what I want to try to explain today is a little bit about how TeX looks at the world. You have to realize, here's this poor computer program sitting there, and a lot of people trying to do things with it, and maybe it's a little tired, maybe it's or maybe it doesn't understand what you're trying to do. It doesn't know too much mathematics. It knows a little bit about spacing, but sometimes somebody says something else, and sometimes your error messages don't seem to make very much sense to you, because what you typed made very good sense to you, and it also made very good sense to TeX. Unfortunately, completely different sense. This to a certain extent is inevitable with any powerful tool. On the other hand, if TeX were designed simply to handle student exercises for a class like this, then we would engineer it differently so that it would recognize certain error messages. So it would recognize certain error messages and recover from them the kind of messages that are often done in this. Excuse me, Jim. Would you go to my office and find a piece of paper that has a 40 on the upper right-hand corner? I seem to have forgotten to bring it. Can you get back there? Yeah, I've got all the other ones. That's the only one I'm missing. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. So. In other words, in this course, we have one set of applications for TeX, and these are pretty much to use the basic format and to do technical typing. But TeX also is used for many other things, and on a lot of different computers. And the system that we have now is not optimized particularly for exactly this class. So in order to understand its point of view, you first want to see how so what it is. So when TeX starts out, you say run TeX, and it comes at your service. But at this point, it's what philosophers would probably say tabula rasa or something like this. It really doesn't know very much. It's ready to do your bidding, but it doesn't know even what it doesn't even know that backslash is going to be the escape symbol. It doesn't know that a $sign is going to be used for mathematics. It doesn't know what any of the characters that you're doing it, because it's set up to be general purpose. It could be used on lots of different keyboards, so for example, the very first thing you type to it assumes it's going to be your escape character, like the backslash. So if the first thing you type is not a backslash, then it says, okay, that's going to be the backslash from now on. Okay? And then so typically the first thing you type then is a backslash. Okay, and then you say input or something else. Okay, so that's one. Now if the first thing that you type is input basic, then it reads in the file called basic, and the very first thing that basic does is it tells it that $sign is going to be used for mathematics, and a down arrow for subscripts and things like that. That's if you have to know exactly, if you want to see exactly what basic has, it's appendix in the manual, appendix B, and the very first 2 lines of that appendix are all full of funny-looking things called chcode, and chcode is a way of defining what is a left brace, what begins a group, what's used for subscripts, superscripts, and things like that. So without that information, TeX doesn't know what to do. Also, at the beginning, it doesn't know any. It doesn't have any fonts. It doesn't. You haven't told it the names of any fonts. So as far as it knows, there aren't any fonts in the world. So after you input BASIC, however, BASIC has told it that about 13 useful fonts of type, and also has defined that your current font is a particular one that will be used for Roman type. Not boldface, not italic. So it helps to, at the very beginning, then TeX has to build up to a certain level of competence, and just by typing /input BASIC, then you've built it up to quite a thing. And I could, of course, have made a special version of TeX that would just start out with what it knows after input BASIC. But a lot of people, after they want to use it for other things, they'll have something else beside BASIC, because BASIC is too basic for them, and so or they'll have other keyboards or something. So the general purpose system is set up to adapt itself. So that's one of the reasons for the first funny error messages that you get. In fact, I used to think that the shortest way that you could cause TeX to go to a screeching halt was this. This is something that some of you I know came up with. Let's see if we can focus on this and get now. I'm going to be showing you a lot of errors.temp of listings of errors.temp files today, and unfortunately, when you print an errors.temp file, at the moment there's something that we haven't fixed. That is, after I typed input paper, the line feed between the carriage return and making it go to the next line got dropped, and so the two lines listed on top of each other. But what actually should have been in the errors.temp file is input paper, and then it says paper tech 1, 2. That means it's starting to read the file called paper.tex, and it read page 1. In the case of the sales system, that was just a directory page, and it read page 2. It started to read page 2, and then it said, "Whoa, you have to define a font first." Now, probably a lot of you have seen this message and say, "What in the heck is going on?" And then it says, and then it just stops essentially at this point. Now, the error message occurred on page 2, line 1. In other words, the very first line of that file, because page 1 is ignored. And also, when you get an error message, first of all, there's this exclamation point and the error message itself. Then comes the two lines saying where the error occurred. The first line is what TeX has already read. The second line is what TeX is going to read next. So all that TeX has read is that capital T. Just the capital T was the very first thing in that file, paper. And so what's going on? You see, the first thing TeX read was a capital T. That means it's supposed to typeset a T, and it doesn't even know that there are any fonts in the world. You haven't input BASIC or anything. So there's nothing it can do. So it just quits. It says whoa and screeching halt. Okay, now that's that. But you're not smiling. Everybody's upset about the fact that it does this. I can see. Okay, now, but the other day, I noticed that there was an even faster way to cause TeX to crash, and that was a person very reasonably started out, said run TeX, and then it prints an asterisk. And okay, well, there are a lot of computer programs that after it prints an asterisk, then you're supposed to give a name of a file. So here was the result. After seeing the asterisk, type paper.tex, and it says, "Whoa, you have to define a font first." Now this is very interesting to me anyway. Maybe not to you, that it would crash so fast on that and in this way. Look what it's read. It's read the PA and not PER. Now, anybody figure that out? This is really kind of strange. Okay, well, now this is like Ellery Queen, you've got all the clues. Uri?
The P has been defined as the...
The P has been defined as the escape character. Okay, so it looks like a backslash to TeX. So the second P is another like a backslash, okay? So now it's picked up backslash A, essentially. Okay, so backslash A, it turns out to be a Scandinavian accent. I didn't give you that clue. But this is, and so it read just the PA and stopped there, you see, after seeing that backslash A, which was saying type an accent, which is again, you have to have some font before, in order to type an accent. So it stopped there and again stopped. Okay, now that's the whoa message, and I found one other example of a whoa message in the files I was spying on, and it was here. This was in something that was a more complicated one than most of you will be doing, because it was using somebody else. It used another thing, and then it had a whole bunch of definitions at the beginning, and there was a typo in the definitions here. This is a definition of a control sequence V bar dn, and actually the braces weren't nested, so that the definition ended right here. And so the text after here was not part of a definition. I mean, the person had meant to have braces around this whole business. But then, so it got into some text, and it started getting into making a box and math formula. And again, it said you had to have a font first. So in general, when you get this message, whoa, you have to define a font first. That usually means that you haven't gotten TeX properly started, like inputting BASIC or getting all of your definitions in there. You started to get into TeX before you ever told TeX what fonts you were doing or getting it started. Okay, now the next thing I got to tell. Okay, so now I guess I should explain this asterisk. So you start running TeX and it gives you an asterisk. What does that mean? That means it's time for you to tell it what to do. If you just type a carriage return, it'll give you another asterisk. Tell me something. Tell me what to do. So asterisk from TeX means give me some input. Now I think the best way to understand TeX is a little bit in humanoid terms. That is, I like to think that the TeX having an input mechanism, or two input mechanisms, one which we'll call its mouth, and one which we'll call its stomach. So the thing first goes into the mouth and gets digested a little bit, and then not digested, but masticated a little bit, and then the stomach takes over and does other things, and then comes the output. I think you can understand the analogy now. Perhaps I should have tried some other analogy. Anyway, now the mouth is a little bit like eyes too, but anyway, it's because we also say it's reading your instructions. Did you find it, Jim? Oh, great. Perfect. Okay, good. I left this in my office, and I was just about ready to. So anyway, asterisk is it tells you that it wants you to tell it what to do. Now, one thing you could do is you could type in the names of fonts, and you could type in codes telling it what that dollar signs are going to be used for math formula and things like that. If you wanted to, you could type that in right after an asterisk. It'll take any instructions there. But if those things are already on the computer somewhere else, then you can say \input and give the name of the file, and then it will read and it will go to that file as a convenience, so you don't have to retype this stuff over and over again. But if you wanted to, you could type everything after an asterisk. Okay. So when you say \input basic, this is just an abbreviation for typing in the whole of the file basic, one line at a time after these asterisks, which would come at you. Okay. And then if now here's an example of one of the people had actually entered a lot of things then after asterisks. Input basic came in first, and then it read in basic 1, 2, 3, 4. It read in the right parenthesis there meant that it got to the end of file basic, and then it gives another asterisk. This person at this point the person typed \h size 11 inches. Incidentally, rather wide for a line width. This is the line width not counting margins, and paper is only 8.5 inches wide in the first place. So if you've got 1-inch margins, you only have 6.5. So this is a rather long line. But anyway, this is the instruction, and TeX is of course set up to produce output for phototypesetters that can typeset newspaper. They can take a long line, so it doesn't mind 11 inches. And then we have actually very beautiful text coming in here, but you notice that it's coming in after asterisks. This is the errors.temp file lists essentially a transcript of what happened as you type. And so here we have a beautiful beautiful passage, now this is then going to be going into TeX, and TeX is accepting it line at a time, and actually what happens is, this is a good example to tell you about TeX modes. And you might also think of moods if you're not used to modes, but I guess modes is coming into fashion now. I mean, I was reading one of William Sapphire's columns the other day about everybody in Washington is talking about such and such a mode or something. So I guess it's coming in to the English language. But anyway, I mean, computer jargon is proliferating. But I didn't even think I got it. I think I knew about modes when I was young, but I don't remember. Anyway, TeX has these different modes of operation, and it's like moods. In other words, it's ready for a certain kind of stimuli, and it'll sort of not be ready for the other one. And the basic 3 modes that TeX has are the vertical mode, the horizontal mode, and the mathematics mode. Now, TeX has a mission in life. The mission in life is to produce pages of output. And but the way it views that is to construct boxes. What it calls boxes. It's a funny word, but it's really 2-dimensional boxes. But it considers a page is a box which is broken down as a list of other boxes, and so a box is either a letter by itself or something like a black rectangle or line rule or something like that that's indivisible, or the box you can look inside it and you'll find more boxes. And you find a list of other boxes. And you have either a horizontal list of boxes or a vertical list of boxes. So a typical page is a box that was broken down into a list of lines stacked on top of each other. So that's a vertical list. And then these lines themselves are boxes that are horizontal lists that were built from left to right, and made up. But ultimately, you come down to the atoms of this thing that don't divide anymore, and those are individual letters. Okay, so but TeX's mission is really to build up boxes by making either lists of horizontal things or vertical things. And at any time, what it thinks it wants to do next is add to one of its lists. Either if it's in horizontal mode, it'll add something to a horizontal list, what it's called, and if it's in vertical mode, it adds to a vertical list. Now, that's one way of thinking about it. Another, maybe more intuitive way, is to saying that vertical mode is when it wants to add something to the page, and horizontal mode is when it wants to add something to a line. Okay, because in vertical mode it's building something in a vertical direction, in horizontal mode it's going this direction. Now, the mathematics mode is what you get into between dollar signs. So those are the three basic modes that TeX has. It starts out in vertical mode. It means it's ready to add something to a page. And when you type a letter T or something in vertical mode, it says, well, what's this letter doing here? It looks to me like the start of a paragraph. And so immediately it goes into horizontal mode and puts in the indent for the paragraph and the T, and your paragraph has started out with an indentation and a T. And then you stay in horizontal mode until you get to a blank line or a PAR, which says that was the end of a paragraph. Okay? So you're in horizontal mode means in a paragraph or in a line, something going horizontally. Okay, so we're starting out, and let's take a look at this transcript and see what happens then. So input basic puts us in vertical mode. We're in vertical mode at the beginning. We inputted basic, and we're still in vertical mode. Then we gave instruction about h size, still in vertical mode. Okay, now v-skip is something you can say in vertical mode. It's vertical skip. Vertical skip, so you can do, if you tried to say h-skip in vertical mode, you'd say, something is wrong. You're trying to skip horizontally, but I'm in vertical mode. I'm trying to build something vertically. So I think that actually happens down below. Okay, so anyway, you say vskip, so it says, okay, that's nice. You put a, you leave an inch of space. Now another thing I have to mention though is that at the top of a page, any skipping that you do is ignored because there's another adjustment that tries to get the top baseline on a page in a particular place. So you'd have to put at least a box containing nothing or something before you do a v-skip. And we have something called tops. There's a control sequence in BASIC nowadays that you can use to get space at the top of a page. But usually, see, between pages, space is if any space that was there gets eliminated between pages, exactly as in a paragraph. If there's a space between words, that space gets eliminated when you go from one line to the next. And so the rules for horizontal and vertical are essentially the same. Now, okay, so anyway, then love came along, centerline love. Now, centerline is something that builds that makes an H box. If you look at what centerline actually does inside of TeX, it's an H box that's also centered, and the width of the H box is the width of the line. So this is going to be an H box, a horizontally built box. It's 11 inches wide, and it's going to be centered. So there'll be the letters LOVE, and then filler put to the left and right, so that those come out centered. In fact, if you want to look at the output, here it is. It doesn't look centered, but that's because you're only seeing the first 7.5 inches of this 11-inch line. Okay. Now, don't laugh. You make mistakes too. No. This is just to show you that the machine is going to methodically. I guess it is funny in a way, because Rhoda the robot was funny when she would obey orders exactly on those old TV shows, right? Now, okay, so v-skip. Oh, okay, so center line makes a box, and then gives it to TeX. Well, TeX was in vertical mode, and when you give TeX a box in vertical mode, it's okay. I'll put that into my vertical list and keep on going. So that box that whole line, in other words, that got added and to the current page. And then comes another v-skip. This v-skip really takes, and this 1 inch space is also added. Not only do you have boxes in these lists, but you have what TeX calls glue. Other people like to think of it as springs. It's something that can be a little flexible, although this 1 inch is exactly 1 inch. If you'd said 1 inch plus a half an inch, that would mean it has a flexibility to expand another half an inch in a pinch. V-skip 1 inch, okay? Then the next comes a blank line, which would say end of paragraph, except we're already in vertical mode, and so this blank line doesn't mean anything. It just looks nice, but it doesn't. TeX will just go right on. Stay in vertical mode. Then comes the letter I. Immediately TeX shifts into horizontal mode because we're into a paragraph, okay? So I may speak to you and so on, and it keeps on going, and all of these are now being built into a horizontal list. In the meantime, TeX has this vertical list for the page that it was working on, but it set this aside, put this on the back burner, and now its attention is turned to horizontal. It's in horizontal mode, and it's going to make a horizontal list. Eventually, later on, it's going to, of course, finish the horizontal list, and that's going to take it back to vertical mode, and then it'll remember what it was doing in vertical mode again. And you can distract it from horizontal mode into math mode, and you can, if you're in math mode, you can distract it again and put it back into horizontal mode if you wanted to, by saying H box in the middle of a math formula, and it'll go back into horizontal mode. But pretty soon it pops back again to a mode it was in when you finish whatever you were doing on one mode, and then it goes back and refreshes its mind as to where it was when you got into that mode. Okay, so this is the basic idea of modes. Now in here. In this paragraph, you'll notice that every once in a while there will be a typographic error, and in fact, lambda is a kind of hard thing to get on some keyboards. I don't know, but but now, one of the reasons why most people then don't type in at the asterisk is because if it's in a file, then it's easier to change the file than to type everything in over again each time perfect until you get it right. Although if you really want to develop your keyboard skills, it's like practicing the piano or something. You could keep on going until you got it perfect over and over. But the fact that what you type in after an asterisk does not get saved in a file. It gets put into the errors.temp file, and so if you knew enough about the editor, you could edit out all these asterisks and error messages and get a source file out of it. In fact, but for the moment, but that takes a little bit of work. But you can get rid of all those asterisks if you knew a little bit about the editor. Okay, so then we got to the end. We got a blank line here, and that said end of horizontal mode. Make up the paragraph. At this point, TeX knows this whole paragraph, and it will, at this point, figure out where to do all the line breaking in the paragraph. It hasn't done lines one line at a time. It hasn't done any of those decisions yet because, as I said, it optimizes. It finds the best way to do it. If there's a choice as to bring some words up or down, it has a neat new procedure, which is one of the things that is one of the scientific innovations in TeX is an efficient way to find the best way to break paragraphs. And there's a long report coming out of our department about why this is so great, about line breaking, but it's so long that you might not want to read it. But I just got so carried away I couldn't explain it in less than 66 pages. Okay. Now, anyway, at the end of the paragraph, it figures out the best way to break that into lines according to its the criteria it knows. And for example, if you put some things in there like these double arrow to say this is not a good place to break, then it tries to avoid breaking there if possible, and so on. And there's all kinds of bells and whistles that you can do to get special effects on that. We probably talk about that just a little bit later on this week. But then at that point, it's taken this paragraph and converted it into a whole bunch of boxes and put those onto the page. And then it goes. Then it's in vertical mode again. Letter I again sends it back into horizontal mode. Okay. End of the paragraph, same thing. So now we come to the end of this paragraph, and then comes H. Then we're in vertical mode again. Now it says H skip 1 inch, and you can't do that in vertical mode. Now that's your most common error that you get from TeX, and so we thought that when we were making up TeX T-shirts, we should say you can't do that in vertical mode. Now, or actually, we should. You can't do it in vertical mode, but that always raises the question: you can't do what? Right? Okay, now when you get this error message, the answer to the question, what can't you do, is, hey, yeah, I see, we're getting a picture of the audience here. So, what can't you do? And the answer is, the last thing TeX has read is what you can't do. Okay, so when you look at the error message, there will be, as I said, the error message is on these two lines. The first line is what it's read, the second line is what it hasn't read. So you look at the end of that line, and in this case it's the H skip. This it hasn't looked at yet. It doesn't matter what you said there. Here was the culprit, the H skip, okay? So that's what you can't do in vertical mode, all right? So that's about entering text after a star. Now, let's see. I got another example of...
Question?
Yeah, question?
Are there any perverse error messages where the problem will have occurred earlier, but the last word will somehow be left up there?
Well, okay. Now, the message that you can't do you can't do something in such and such a mode. That message always indicates exactly what it says that you can't do. But you might, the fact that you're in horizontal mode might be because of the error or in vertical mode might be because of an error that you made up above. Like you'll get something that says you can't do that in math mode, but you didn't really want to be in math mode. It's just that you forgot the $ to end the equation. So sometimes you'll make an error, but the error will be up on line 10, but TeX won't see anything wrong until line 13, because everything did make sense. If you left out the dollar sign at the end of a formula, well, it just looks like a very long formula. And there's no way for TeX to know that it started to be more meaningful as English text than as a mathematical formula. TeX doesn't know that much about English. Yuri?
Yeah, I wonder about when you put the file, as you go over, when every line starts with an asterisk.
When every line starts
just the
with
example
asterisk,
that
yes?
rather than inputting a complete file, is the TeX look every time that you put carriage return, or because it seems that it gives you an answer after every line, like this error message. So
carriage return, I don't quite understand the question. A carriage return is very much like a space, except that it will notice two carriage returns with only spaces between them, will be recognized as a blank line.
Well, I'm asking, is the TeX interacting with you when you are inputting the file that way?
TeX it goes in the mouth, and it goes into and then the mouth takes it down to the stomach puts it into the horizontal list. What the mouth actually does, the purpose, I didn't describe the mouth very well. The purpose of the mouth is to recognize special symbols as different from others. A backslash, for example, there's 11 or actually 13, 14 kinds of symbols. A backslash is one of them. A left brace is another one. A dollar sign is another one, and a letter is another one. And the mouth recognizes those kinds of things. And then after it swallows these things, then when the stomach gets them, it's been classified as to saying this was the mathematical delimiter, the thing like a dollar sign, or this was the beginning of a group, like a left brace. Or if the mouth sees a backslash, the mouth continues to read for the whole control sequence and figures out what control sequence it is, and sends that to the stomach. So the function of the mouth is to convert the raw stuff from the outside world into digestible quantities, which are classified as to saying this is something that has some special meaning. The stomach is what actually it gets in these modes, and when the stomach gets a letter, for example, from the mouth, and it was in vertical mode, the stomach says, oh, and I'm going to go into horizontal mode. Then it starts to build a list. The stomach's this final digestion process of TeX is building lists. So after you typed in a line and hit a carriage return, then the horizontal list has gotten longer by what you typed in that line, if it's part of a paragraph. Okay. So it's still sitting there in the horizontal list. It hasn't been typeset into lines, but it's a long list of things saying this was this letter, then this letter, then this letter, then a space, and this letter, and this letter, so on.
I guess my question is then when is it typesetting it? Typesetting
occurs. So after you finish the paragraph, then the list is broken into horizontal boxes. But still, it's not typesetting. Those horizontal boxes are put into the vertical list for the page. Okay. Then the page gets longer and longer and longer. All of a sudden, the page is so long that it's too big to fit on one physical page. At that point, the TeX output routine gets called into action. And TeX output routine makes up a box, which is defined, and that great glorious box is sent to the output. So it's deferred into these long levels. So you have to think of some other vowels or something where this output routine lives. But the final box then when it's finally made, that's a box that is made by the output routine. So the TeX, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this course. June?
You mentioned when you were discussing centerline in that example that centerline essentially was in itself a definition written in TeX.
That's right.
Is there any way to easily see those? In other words, can you explore, can you move down in the stack of commands given that there is something called centerline to see what the expansion of that would be?
It appears on error messages that we'll get to later on, so I'll try to remember that. But meanwhile, I want to go on. Yeah. So now here's another example, a simple example of the "you can't do it" error. And this one was that you can't do it in horizontal mode. and this time it was V-skip that you couldn't, so you can only H-skip in horizontal mode and V-skip in vertical mode, all right? So now let's think about this a minute and see what it means. This was the only error that one particular person had in the file. So in horizontal mode, that means we are in the midst of a paragraph. Okay? Horizontal mode is when you're adding to a paragraph, and then all of a sudden a V-skip occurred. So what the person forgot was a blank line at the end of a paragraph before wanting to do a skip. Okay? Because it says that because apparently this vertical skip of 2.54 centimeters was to be, actually this is some scientist trying to say 1 inch. I mean, that's exactly 1 inch. But some scientific journals don't allow you to publish things in inches anymore. So anyway, but the instruction to TeX it would understand, and a European maybe would also prefer to say it this way. Okay, so now V-skip 2.54 centimeters. Anyway, this was vertical amount of skip, but it's in the middle of a paragraph. You can't do that. Okay. Now, TeX then, after an error message, does something that I forgot to tell you about, and that is it gives an upper arrow instead of an asterisk. Okay. Now that's the other thing that TeX will do, asking for instructions. The up arrow prompt is saying respond to an error message. The asterisk means give me some more input. Up arrow says, tell me what to do on an error message. Well, this person said question mark. What should I do? Doesn't know. And if you type in something after that up arrow that isn't one of the things TeX understands as something to do after it reminds you what you can do. Carriage return to continue. Line feed to flash error messages. Flashing error messages mean it just won't stop anymore. It won't give you any of these. It won't stop for prompts. It'll just let them run by until you get to the end. And then there's something about ignoring next tokens of input. That means that you tell the mouth to chew up. If you type a 1 at this point, the mouth will chew up one thing and just spit it out. And if you type a 9, it would chew up the next 9 things and get rid of them. And for example, if I had typed 6 here, it would chew up 2.54 space C. And then it would stop again, and I could see that the M was ready to come in next. But anyway, maybe you didn't want to have those messy, cluttered up. I is for insertion. We'll talk about that in a minute. And E is edit. If you type E, TeX stops immediately, goes back to the file where you were on that page 2, line 7, and you can correct the error right in the file and start the whole process over again. And X is the way to stop. Now, it gives you the prompt again. And this time, the person said carriage return and went on. Well, what happened? Well, when you get the error message that says you can't do it in some mode or other, and you go on, it just ignores whatever you did. It just forgets about it. So it's as if this V-skip didn't appear here. So the 2.54 centimeters is going to be added to the paragraph. Okay? And so here is the output. Introduction. 2.54 centimeters. The purposes of this paper is. That's interesting too. Maybe the purpose of this paper. Okay. Anyway, this is what happened then. Okay. Now there would have been a way to recover without going back to edit the file, and we'll talk about that too very soon. Okay. So one main point is you can't do it means the last thing that shows in your error message is what you couldn't do, and it'll be ignored if you proceed. Okay. Next, the next most common error that you get is undefined control sequence. Okay. Here's an example of that. And again, undefined control sequence. The same thing happens if you continue right on after undefined control sequence. Then it will ignore it will just ignore the thing that was undefined and starting. Now in this particular case, instead of saying input TEXCLS, which was the file name, it just gave the file name with a backslash, and so it was an undefined control sequence. Furthermore, the control sequence ended at the period there because it just went up through the letters, and so there were these two things left over. Point 1. Okay, so typing 2 at this point says get rid of that point 1. You see, this was the way to delete something if you made it. Otherwise, if you'd gone on, it would see that point and it would say, whoa, you have to define a font first. You'd be in real trouble because you'd try to typeset a period and you haven't defined anything yet. We're just starting out this one. So deleting 2 got saved a little bit of time. Although if you could have started over again. Since we were at the very beginning. But deleting this illustrates what happens if you delete the next 2 characters, the point and the 1. By the way, the way TeX counts that, if it's a control sequence, the whole control sequence only counts as one thing deleted in that case. Okay, now the next time, so after deleting 2 things, it comes back and gives you another chance. This asterisk in parenthesis means it was something you typed in after an asterisk instead of being in a file. Otherwise, it would say page 2, line 7 or something like that, where it was in the file. But this is where the source of the information was that the error was detected in. Okay, so we went on here and it typed in input TeX class. You can't see it again because of this stupid mistake in TeX that right now it prints these things on top of each other. Sorry. And then comes undefined control sequence again, page 2, line 6. This is a silly little test of TeX. Okay, now TeX is an undefined control sequence. The BASIC doesn't have this one in it. It was one of those things that I only defined in something I'm writing about TeX itself. So the logo for TeX is not there, and so it will just be ignored if you go on. And so this would say this is a silly little test of nothing, of blank, right? And now. Again, there's a way to adjust this without going back and editing the file, and this is the idea of insert, and so I illustrated this by typing I at this point. One thing you can respond to an error message is I, which means insert something into wherever you are now. And so it gives you an asterisk again, and you say TEX, and that TEX got inserted right at the current place. At the end of the insert, then TeX continues with whatever it was doing, so it'll continue with this period. The period is the thing that hasn't been read yet. You understand that? The second line, this period here hasn't been looked at yet. So you can see what's going to come up next. So I inserted the TEX and then got the period. And it continued. And in fact, the next error was down on line 16. You can't do it in horizontal mode. And that was because we wanted to actually, we forgot a blank line before this V-skip. Okay? Now again, insert is used here to fix this up. And this is now, if after you've used TeX for about a week, you'll appreciate the ability to recover from errors, I think. But you don't have to. You could just go back and start over again, and but I'm just showing you what's available because once you get used to it, you'll like it. One other thing I have to mention though is when I typed this TEX here, it didn't go into the file. The other file that this was coming from, this TEXCLS file, still says \TEX in it. I just typed it now to say, well, I think I know what's wrong, and if I type this, I'll get some output, and I'll be able to get more out of this run by catching several things at once. And then everything you type in, you see, goes into the errors.temp file, so you can use this as a reference when you want to make corrections later. So after you've got your output, you can look at your errors file and say, oh yeah, here were some errors that I could fix up. And then you can use that as a clue as to how to correct several things at once, because for efficiency you find that you'd like to not only correct one thing and then start TeX again and then correct one more thing, but sometimes you can catch several. Okay, now here we are. You can't do a V-skip in horizontal mode. The remedy to that, insert. I inserted a par and a V-skip. Now, I inserted a par to finish the paragraph. \PAR is just like a blank line. And then I inserted V-skip because this V-skip has already been deleted. It's something you can't do that gets deleted. So I put it back in again. So I said V-skip again, and now it's ready. The 50 points are there. Okay. And then it finished the file. This right parenthesis that you see on top of the asterisk, unfortunately, should really be on a separate line. It finished the file, so it got to the end of the file and give you an asterisk. So it's not done yet. It's read the file, but still wants more. The reason is that that particular file didn't say end, didn't say or vfill either. So typing vfill end got to the end, and so it made a nice little. It was actually a very nice little exercise here. But you'll notice by this one actually tied in. I was really delighted to see this because it tied in most of what I talked about the first day. But you see, TeX comes out with it just as TEX, but we did get it to recover, okay? And so it says, I'm trying to test everything I learned in class today. You know, it's quote marks. You see that. If you look at the file, it lists the phone number. There was an H box around here so that it wouldn't break around lines and things like that. And example of an M dash, example of an N dash. All these things were in there. This line should have some extra blanks here, and then some more text. You see, it all worked out very fine, and also the error recovery did work something. Okay, now another kind of recovery that time to use input was illustrated quickly here, and that is I was trying to help someone, and I said type input paper, but it turned out that it wasn't called paper.tex. This one was called gym.tex, and so unfortunately you can't see this. It'll say asterisk JIM, and so when you get this message that says lookup failed on file paper.tex, that means it couldn't find. There's no such file around here in this computer. So you can insert the real file name you meant. So responding with an I, and then you get an asterisk, and then the real file name, JIM. Now here's something that I just got to mention. You also type a space at the end of that. At the end of a file name, TeX gets confused because file names have a strange combinations of characters are allowed, and so in order to know when you got to the end of the file name, TeX likes to always have a space at the end of every file name, a space for a carriage return. So I typed in JIM space carriage return, and then it started out okay. Found gym.tex and went on fine until it got a V-skip in horizontal mode again. Okay.
I'm a little confused as to whether the input would have to be typed again, the slash input.
No, the input actually that's a good question, but the input is already there. It's the paper that didn't get down.
But since that's how do you distinguish that from a case where the incorrect command or something that you can't do is being ignored?
Yeah, the general rule is that the chapter on errors in the manual I think was careful to say for each error what will happen next if you go on, you can't remember all of those rules though because there are 60 error messages, and so I'm stressing the most common 5 essentially, and those 5 you can remember how to recover on. In the case of a file name that you can't find, you just type the file name in again. You don't have to say why it's looking for the file name. It might be the name of a font, or it might be the name of something else. But in this case, the input is already remembered. So if you typed input again, then it would say lookup failed and file input, and then it would, and then you would say, oh, I guess I don't have to type input, and then it would. I think it gives you 3 chances after which it gives up, something like that. Okay, next. Next most common, so I told you the most common errors are the you can't do that variety and the undefined control sequence variety. In both those cases, if you go on, it just ignores what was wrong. And furthermore, if you insert something, it'll be inserted in place of what was what was discarded, of what caused the error. Okay. Now the next most common one is probably, let's see, number 14 here. Is something that we get that looks like this: missing dollar sign inserted. Okay, and this was on page 1, line 26. But now here we have a new feature about error messages, and that is you're getting 4 lines instead of 2 for this error message. And this first line doesn't look too meaningful. It just says bad, and it looks rather threatening, you know. It says to be read again. Well, okay. Now, what happened is you got to the end of a paragraph or a blank line in the middle of a math formula, And this is the way TeX gets back into sync. It's a lot of time. This is the way it'll catch you. If you've forgotten to put a $ at the end of a formula, then when you get to the next blank line, or the end of a page or something, end of a file page, it will say, you can't, it doesn't say you can't end a paragraph in math mode. It says you forgot a $. Okay, this is a little more explicit. This time it has some idea as to what happened. So it inserts it for you too. So when when the error message says it was inserted, that means it's already recovered something for you. It's already done something for you. It's put in a $ there. And then now this 2 lines is because actually it read a paragraph and then it put something into one of its lists that was so funny that TeX doesn't even know what it means, so it's called bad. And it's going to read that bad again, but it isn't going to cause any harm. So don't worry about it. It's just printed out there, but we'll explain this to be read again in a second. Anyway, what that meant was then at this particular example, it got to the end of page 1, line 26, and there was just I don't see that it showed up in the output actually. Okay, here was another case. Display math should end with $. If you started out something with $, then you've got to end it with $, and a single $, isn't going to be good enough, and so it corrects it actually. If you go on, it'll actually pretend that there was a $. There. Okay, let me see. Multi-line error message. Oh yeah. Now, the next thing is I wanted to talk about messages that take several lines, and here is one that takes 3 lines. So so this will illustrate maybe almost too much at once, but I think it's okay. Here is a case. You can do that in restricted horizontal mode. Now, I said there are 3 modes: vertical, horizontal, and math. Actually, there's 6 because there are 2 flavors of each mode. There's the restricted vertical mode, is not building, not on the top level of vertical mode, not making pages for output, but putting things in vertical direction for a V box, for a box that's built inside of something. Similarly, there's a restricted horizontal mode, which is not making a line of a paragraph, but it's making a line for an H box. And otherwise, these modes are very similar to each other, but this one particular one occurred in the middle of a center line. Center line is building something in restricted horizontal mode because it's not the same as a paragraph. So ordinary horizontal mode is a paragraph. Restricted horizontal mode is any other horizontal constructions that you're doing. And the reason is that you're not allowed to do, it's called restricted because you're not allowed to do everything you can do in a paragraph in the middle of a center line. But here I got a message that described the error, I'm sorry, with 6 lines, not 2. Okay, well the bottom one is the one you usually look at. The bottom one is the one that you typed in your file. So page 2, line 6 is where the error really was, and if you look at it, but sometimes you have to scan up above and see what was done. But these other lines were things written by other people, and here is the answer to June's question. Center line is defined in terms of something else. So what actually TeX did with that, it read center line, and then it read everything that's going to get fed to center line. So it has already read all the way to the end of this right brace, and then that text was passed to the centerline routine. Now the centerline routine is expanded here. You can't see all of it though. There's 3 dots means there's something missing at the beginning. And in fact, though it's only 2 characters worth is missing, so it's a little bit flaky there. I mean, it could have said centerline. Anyway, centerline, and it takes one argument. So centerline of something, and gets expanded into, and then this is the way centerline actually gets expanded. So if you really care, once you start to learn about defining control sequences, then you can see what they are. And somebody said this is the way a centerline actually means. It means make an H box to your current size, and you're supposed to center it. That's the way you do it. Now, then the argument is the thing that was this number 1. Now, this all looks pretty scary at first, but I think it makes sense to me anyway. Namely, this tells you what TeX was reading when the error occurred. the last thing it read was this AST. And then the next thing it's going to read is on the next line, but there's nothing on the next line. So the next thing it's going to read is it's done with this. That means the next it'll be done with the argument. The argument was the thing that was passed to the centerline routine. So everything between braces was passed to the centerline routine without the braces. And so the asterisk was passed, and then there's nothing after that. Well, then we popped down a level. And the centerline routine came to the point where it said, read this argument to the centerline routine. Insert it right here. So when the centerline routine said put number 1 in here, that meant argument number 1 goes right there. And TeX started to read the argument. So after TeX reads this, it's going to drop back, and the next thing it'll read is the rest of the centerline routine, which is this \HSS, which is a horizontal stretch or shrink instruction. And then it'll read a right brace. And then it'll drop back to page 2, line 6. Okay? So this is what happens when you use a control sequence that's been defined by somebody else. It grabs up the arguments and calls them number 1 and number 2 and so on. And then it starts to go into the text that somebody else typed in, like hbox to psi, and that text can say at a particular point start reading the argument. And so it gets up higher and higher levels, and then finally it winds its way down again below the levels. And the error message can be quite inscrutable until you get used to it. But the main thing is first look at the bottom. That tells you that tells you as far as TeX read where the error occurred. Then look up at the top, and that's the offending thing. That's what you can't do in restricted horizontal mode. Let's hope that makes sense to you. And the answer is yes. \AST is something that's not allowed. It's a symbol that's a mathematical symbol, so it wasn't allowed outside of formulas. You got a question?
My question before was really more aimed at how can I see these things? And I would suppose that I know that there is such a thing as centerline predefined, and I wanted to see what someone did because I wanted something that was just a little bit different.
Okay, well, look up tracing in the index of the manual, and it tells you how to trace macros. Okay. Now, okay, the next thing that I got to mention is...
Question.
Okay.
In that previous one, if you'd wanted to insert this \AST, would you have had to put
okay. Yeah,
that's
good question. Good question. We have this on the screen again. So what could I do? I could say insert here, and then it would give me an asterisk, and then I would insert $AST $, and carriage return, and it would continue. It would insert the $AST $, and then it would go on. In fact, that's great because I can show you exactly what happens here. It'll pop down to different levels of insert. This was the one we looked at long ago, where it was being entered line by line. You couldn't do that in vertical mode. Okay, the person said, "Oh, yeah, I meant V-skip." Okay, so typed in I. Now this person had trouble finding the carriage return key or something, but inserted not only V-skip, which would have been the right, insert V-skip carriage return, and then it would have been fine, but inserted V-skip 11 lambda 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 lambda. Okay, so that all got inserted in place of H-skip. So now TeX is reading V-skip 11 lambda 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 lambda, and then it will drop down to the 1 inch, and that's shown here on the next error message. It read V-skip 11 lambdas. Okay, it doesn't know what those are. It has to be 11 somethings, and so the error occurred. The next thing that TeX will read is this lambda, which is something it's reading again. That's what this reading again means. On the level below that, it's reading this. It has already read this lambda. Okay, it was supposed to mean inches or points or something, and that lambda didn't make any sense. And at that point, it said it's an illegal unit of measure. It inserted PT into the text, and now but it backs up and it's going to read that lambda again. So that lambda is the same as this lambda. After it's done reading that one, see it's on the second line, so it's going to read it again. Then it's going to drop down to this one. This is the end of your insert, and this is, and then it's going to drop down to 1 inch. Yes, question?
I think the source of the lambda is that on data media, control H, which is the regular backspace, is top H, which is lambda.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this was done on a data media. Okay, good, because I wasn't watching. Okay, so anyway, there it went, and so finally what actually TeX read was V-skip 11 points, and then a bunch of lambdas, which started a new paragraph. and then the h-skip had already been thrown away. So then it'll say lambda, 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 lambda 1 inch, and that'll be the beginning of a paragraph. Okay. However, at the time this error message occurred, it said illegal unit of measure. The person decided to insert another v-skip in the middle of that. And so it added another v-skip, and so that you v-skip not only 11 points, but also another 1 inch. And that was inserted even on top of this. So there were 4 levels of input going on. First this v-skip, then the lambda, then these others. And everything went in. And finally, it was in the middle of a paragraph, then our just line came along, and this right justified line was actually contributed to the whole paragraph. So we had a paragraph that started out with a whole bunch of things followed by a right justified line, which was 11 inches long. So the paragraph starts out with a bunch of lambdas, and then it has a huge 11-inch box. And at this point, it doesn't know how to break that into lines, so it says over full box. And the overfull box got in too wide, okay? Now, tomorrow we'll talk about things like overfull boxes, which is the next thing that is a big nuisance, okay? Right, that's all. I have only a few. This is the first one, and this is the second. Hey, Joe. This is amazing. Thank you. Yes, I'm glad to answer. I think there's another class coming in, so can we go outside? Oh, sure. I'll be free in a minute. I'll talk outside.
You say you want to defer questions in the hallway?
Yeah, there's other classes coming in.